Volatility is well and truly back for Bitcoin and cryptos, with Bitcoin going up 6.5% 2 days ago, now down 4.5%. How is this affecting the crypto market and those late to buying altcoins? Let's look at that in today's video, looking at the areas that are safer to be entering and the areas that are potentially more likely to be tops forming in the market. Basically, the high risk areas for cryptocurrencies and how you can prevent getting wrecked in the markets. That's what we're going to answer in today's video. So make sure you have hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But if you have been following for several months, thank you very much. Check out the pinned comment there for your question of the day. And of course, the Black Friday sale that is coming up very, very soon. You have reached, you know the deal, your home of macro cycle analysis. We cover Bitcoin, crypto, the stock markets, commodities, and the real estate cycle. So what we do full time, and I personally have been doing this for over 16 years. All right, guys, let's just dive straight into today's video. Starting with the S&P 500, just looking at the strength of the markets before we get into those major signals in those Bitcoin charts. And of course, cryptos, those high risk areas. This is the time in the market where if we haven't got our systems set up properly, when that crazy bull market comes, in my opinion, in 2024, then things get really tricky and the emotions run absolutely wild. So what we're doing is just looking at the markets here, the traditional markets, just to give us an update of where they currently sit, because of course we need to see the risk coming back into the market in order for that money to then flow out into Bitcoin and to cryptocurrencies. We're not going to see a Bitcoin bull market and crypto bull market if the traditional markets are not also in a bull market. That's my theory. So far, it has been working pretty well. And of course, we all have to have our own theory. So if someone disagrees and they think Bitcoin can go up while the rest of the markets go down, just try it out, test it, and see how those results would have turned out over the last 10, 12 years. Anyway, moving forward, the S&P 500 has been moving through our transitional phase, or did already do that, and pumped back up. Now we've got the higher low forming, and just over the last couple of days, it has continued to hold that ground at 4,500. Now on the daily here, we can see that we had a little bit of a reversal here at the top, and it's really trying to push higher again. So it's no wonder why we're getting that bit of a rejection here after such a strong move to the upside over the last few weeks, coming out of late October into quarter four, as we were looking for higher lows. Now I've got here probably won't be broken. So I don't think these lows now are going to be broken for the S&P 500, just as I talked about with the March low. The most significant low for the stock markets, March of 2023, mark that in. I don't think these lows are going to get broken in this cycle on the way up. If they are, all hell will break loose. Anyway, that's the rejection point there, roughly 4,560, so 4,560 points. I think that's going to get overcome eventually, and then consolidation before we break to higher prices, because it looks like we're on our way to new all-time highs. It's going to take some time, but we've all got patience, haven't we? So moving on to the NASDAQ, this is actually closer to those highs. So our big tech stocks are also taking most of the gains again, which of course pushes the S&P 500 up, but more importantly, it pushes the NASDAQ 100 up even further. So the tech game is very, very strong in this stage of the cycle. We can see that there's only a few points away from breaking to a fresh high from that July top. And like we covered in yesterday's video, just looking at a new all-time high. So these are the signs that we want to see for Bitcoin and crypto to then get those into new all-time high prices. So as I said, I've got a video coming up just looking at the overall cycle and structure of the traditional markets and how they form all-time highs before Bitcoin and crypto, which is just one more of those major signals that we're going to see higher prices for Bitcoin and crypto. It's all about risk. So that's the S&P, that's the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones also pushing up relatively strong here, just getting towards some resistance at 35,000 points, but it also put in a March higher low. So basically, there is good health here in the traditional markets, even though we saw a lot of fear coming in at the end of October. I think that was probably the best buy the dip opportunity since the March low. I mean, when you look at the chart, yeah, but when you looked at the fear at that time, people thought that we were going to see much, much lower prices. So markets are looking relatively healthy. As for the crypto market cap, so the total crypto market cap, you can see I've got a few of these points highlighted here. And we still have 3 days to go for this chart to close because we're on the weekly, just looking at something a little bit bigger. but I want to draw our attention to what's going on right now and pay attention to it over the next few days, because we get the close on Monday morning or Sunday evening, wherever you are around the world. What has happened in the past at these points has essentially held the market up, whether it's shorter term time frame, whether it's longer term. You can see here it held the market up for several weeks, dumped it, continued to hold up, and then eventually we got the breakout. We had the hold up here. Sure, it pushed a little bit higher. Same deal here, pushed a little bit higher. It reversed here, came back down. So the same sort of deal. I'll explain that in just a minute, but I just want to draw our attention to that now, because if this closes underneath this level and remains red, then we have the possibility of the market stalling out for a bit. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't break any higher than this level, but you can see that in the other cases here, it did break a little higher. So that obviously spurs on the bulls. We'll see those big calls again. This just gets into that emotional side of trading and investing, especially with cryptos. Everyone is just absolutely mental when it comes to their emotions, as most people don't have plans. Hopefully you do. But essentially, all I'm saying here is there is the possibility of further upside, but I don't think it'll be very much if this bar remains like this in the next 3 days or so. And I say that because on the daily, we were looking at this drop. That's one of the biggest drops that we had seen in the entire move to the upside. So you can see that momentum is starting to slow to the upside. It doesn't mean that it stops, but you need to pay attention to momentum slowing. And this is how we assess the risk in entering a market. Is the momentum slowing? Doesn't mean it will stop exactly at that point, but if it's slowing, then we probably don't want to be in those cryptos, because a lot of the market has already been, it's already moved, and we're just starting to see the late players come into the market here. We saw a nice day up a couple of days ago. We saw the reversal here, and we're just starting to see a little bit of indecision at the tops, which is not what you want to see as soon as you get into a trade. You want to see that sort of indecision at the bottom, because it's still a battle between the bulls and the bears. Who's going to take this thing up, and is it actually going to go up? And as you start to see these little higher lows form, that gives you more and more confidence that it's just going to take its time. We've got to be patient, because if you could see, this was a month of making higher lows through September into mid-October, and then finally we got the breakout in late October. So those things take time. We're just looking now for any sort of signs that this is, again, starting to roll over. That doesn't mean long term that I think Bitcoin is going to break down, take out 25K, shows over, all that sort of stuff. Not at all. Like we looked at in yesterday's video, some of these prices I don't think will ever be reached again in this cycle. So prices that we'll never see again. I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video if you want to go and check that out. Bitcoin on the daily looks very, very similar to this sort of pattern here. I know I was just looking at the total market cap. But you can see the move to the downside, bigger than anything we'd seen earlier. We got the pump up, the pump down. Same deal, right? So let's move back to the total crypto market cap, looking at this historic play here where all these white arrows are. And I'm mostly interested in what happens to the market where these white arrows are in the early stage, or the first half of the bull market. This is your bull market, the low to the high. Draw a line roughly through the middle, and you can see where these signals are coming up. And we're more focused on the signals earlier in the cycle because the indecision is still there. There is still bears thinking the market is going to drop to 10 or 14K. This one was really interesting from yesterday. If you want to go and look at the pinned comments where people think this market's going to drop to, like, I don't think this is at all possible, but this is why we're still at the early stages, because people still think this market can take out 15K, although we've been up for over 1 year now, or basically dead on 1 year. Okay. Anyway, what are these signals? Looking at the volume, looking at the bar pattern, and they've called the market here. So they're red, but they've had a higher high. In most of these cases, they've had a higher high. You can see through here, the market continued up, pulled back, big volume. That is looking at the Wyckoff analysis. And so we're starting to see a slowdown here where you're getting a big push early on and then a reversal. So you're seeing demand come in, met by supply, which then pushes the market down, and you get higher volume, meaning that there is potentially more supply coming onto the market at these stages. That is what that particular bar means, which is why it's so important to pay attention to it, especially if we're looking at a larger term time frame here than most look at. And we know most people look at sort of 1 hour, 4 hour, just the daily, but let's step it up to the weekly where it's a bigger signal. And you can see that although that wasn't it, the big players aren't just going to sell at the exact top and then buy again at the exact bottom. It takes a bit of a time frame here to unload and to test those signals, because they could be wrong as well. Maybe this turns around and starts to go up and really takes out bigger highs. So they don't want to be unloading all of their bags at the same time, but they're testing here to see whether the momentum is going to keep up, meaning that the demand is going to keep pushing and absorb that supply. And if the supply is absorbed, then you would see higher prices. But in this case, it stopped out. Remember, this is a weekly chart. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on the 7th week, nearly 2 months, then it finally broke out of that top. So they were able to score cheaper Bitcoin here. They saw the momentum was stopping. This was the next entry point. Then we had another nice entry bar here. So that's what it looks like in a chart. As a little mini lesson there, we've seen this bar come in again, higher volume, relatively speaking, compared to any other bar like that. Basically a reversal here, high volume. And you can see it was higher than most of these bars here. Moving forward again, this one, although it's not that much higher, you can see relatively speaking, it's basically higher than anything all the way back to this bar here, and then going further back all the way to this little section here on the downside. So the market paused, had a little bit of a test higher. The demand was met, supply came in, meaning there was more sellers than buyers. And guess what? Market came back down. We even see it on shorter term areas here, and this is what I was alluding to earlier on in the piece. You can see that this bar right here was huge volume compared to anything that we'd seen all the way back to this area where the market went down, but it only had another week down before it took off in the opposite direction. So they were testing for the supply to come in, but the demand overtook the supply. We had higher swings, higher swing lows, higher swing tops. There's the breakout. There's the confirmation signal using our Gan Swing Indicator, which for a little shill here, you can find a link to in the video description. It's what I use for all of my trading. And then you can see the market's taken off from that point. So it was a pretty nice little signal in there. This one here went down for a little bit. It failed, but it kept you in the market using the swing. So heading back to the previous cycle, does this repeat? For sure. Huge volume here as the market ran up into that peak, bigger than anything it had seen in that entire period. Market rolled over. This, of course, is the COVID drop. But barring any sort of black swan event, if we see something like that, then you've got another signal here that held the market up again, meaning that the market stopped. The price came up, but then basically it stopped for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Broke out on the 12th. So basically 3 months holding this market up. It wasn't super bearish, but it did hold the price up. And that's what we want to be cautious of here, because in that time, who knows what happens to cryptos? Sometimes a lot of them start to bleed out because Bitcoin is still holding strength and people get a little bit shaky because it's early on in the piece. It's not the all-out altcoin season where everything just pumps up. And a lot of them just don't hold their ground. So that's why it's important just to pay attention to what's going on in the overall space when we see these bars. So we have a few days to go. I'm just cautious now after such a significant move to the upside to just pay attention to what happens now with the price. Maybe we get a little bit further push. I know everyone's going to think it's like an up, down, sideways move. It's not what I'm saying whatsoever. It's basically looking at momentum, as hopefully we're all interested in improving our trading and investing skills here. This is the total market cap. This includes everything: Bitcoin, ETH, stables, cryptos, you name it. As for the Bitcoin chart, the volume still has not got to that point, which is interesting to note because maybe we still have a little bit of room to move here, which could send this one up a little higher to the point where Bitcoin might test this 42K. We're getting quite close to the market now. The nuanced part here, trying to forecast potentially what happens next, which is the most difficult game in the world. And you're able to start seeing how these patterns can play out. Not exactly, but they rhyme. So that's what we're looking at for BTC over the coming days as we head into the weekly close in another 3 days' time. Going to be interesting to see where this one lands. Now, another chart for Bitcoin for the momentum stalling is everyone's favorite, the RSI. So I don't use this one so much because I've got the swing chart and the volume, which essentially looks at the same thing. But in terms of a simple chart that many people do use, you can see on the daily here that we're just getting a little bit of a pullback on the RSI. So the relative strength index, meaning that the strength to the upside is starting to slow, even though you're still seeing the prices head up that little bit higher. And I've also got one more chart to show you, everyone's favorite, the fear and greed index as well. So this essentially could mean that we're in for some sort of stalling period or quick move or quick reset for the RSI and the price just to get it back to the zone underneath the 50 reading here. So you've got 50 there, it's the halfway point. Somewhere in this zone usually resets it, especially at these early stages. What most like to see is a reading under 30, and that's going to reset that and then hopefully give the market a little more strength to move back to the upside. That's on the short term, that's the daily. Onto the weekly, and you've got a slightly different picture here. We've finally started to push out of the 70 point and looking at an overbought territory, so above these levels here. Now that's on a weekly chart here, and I wanted to bring up what happened last time because this also works really well with the crypto fear and greed, because you want to see these readings or these indicators reset in order to keep the momentum going. So now we're trying to balance a short term and a long term, looking at some sort of forecast here for what could happen with the market. So you got these higher reading on the RSI moving to an overbought territory. Then you start to get a falling here. So we've got the prices coming down again. The reset underneath the 50 is what we've talked about already, and the market gets to move on yet again because the relative strength is reset, giving the market a little more momentum to the upside. Now, layering this in with the crypto fear and greed, this can and most likely will lead to extreme emotions. So we don't know for sure what will happen for the readings. Is this going to top out here and come down? Are we just breaking out of the 70 and going to move up? But one thing we do know for sure is the wild fluctuations, even though they are well and truly up in the same area, will lead to extreme emotions and people not knowing what the hell's going on. $14,000 down to the August prices of roughly 9 to 10, 9,500. Not a huge move, about 35%, led to this extreme greed above 90. Then, in a matter of weeks, down to below 10. So the two most extreme readings you can have happened in probably one of the smallest ranges you can find in Bitcoin's history there. When you account for the extreme of the emotion, you would not think that you would have an extreme motion in this tiny period here. Yeah, I've zoomed out to show you how ridiculously small it is. But yes, there was a huge extreme emotion there as we look at the June reading to the peak to the August reading at that low. So in terms of the crypto fear and greed, never in its history has it gone from such an extreme greed to such an extreme fear reading ever. And then when you consider where that sat on the market, I mean, it's a 30% drop after a 350% rise. We haven't seen a 350% rise in a matter of a few months. We have, however, seen a nice little gain here from 25 to 36, 38K. So are we going to get such an extreme reading? I don't think so. But if we do reset, that is going to be a perfect buy the dip opportunity when layered in with Bitcoin and using your own RSI reading, or in our case, using our volume and price analysis and our swing chart, of course. Now, if you want to learn more about that, make sure you continue to subscribe to the channel and like the content so that it comes up in your feed. And if you want to go that extra step further, check out the Black Friday sale that is coming up. Link is in the top of the video description. Now, I've got just a little more to get through with you guys after looking at the short term, the long term on the RSI, and of course, the crypto fear and greed index. Essentially, we're seeing momentum come to a point where it seems like something needs to reset, at least in the short term. The other thing here we're looking at is ETH. ETH pumped up on that ETF news and didn't go any further. Hit the 50%, got rejected. It's continued on the way down. It's basically giving back those gains as well. So this could all start to play into that whole coming to a resetting point for some of the cryptos which have also popped off. Now, it's not going to be all of them. You can cherry pick some of the great stuff here, like Render, which has just been going absolutely bananas. You could cherry pick Rune, which has been going bananas as well. You could cherry pick AVAX, which has gone bananas in the last couple of weeks. But when you scroll out, the stuff has been down for quite some time, and it definitely needed a point to reset to the upside after being crushed to the downside. So this is going to be a good time to see what happens longer term, see if we get that reset on a lot of these cryptos, which could then be that buying opportunity, that pullback that everyone's been waiting for. But yes, there's going to be people that say, get it now, got to get in the next day on that dip. All I'm saying here is just be patient. Guys, thanks very much for your time and attention. I'll see you at the next video. Take care. Check out the pinned comment for the Black Friday sale and question of the day. And I'll see you at the next one. Till then, peace out.